Bowers had confided in his minister that he had seen, quote, more than he had told publicly. Okay, so now we get into more information, and there is more coming, you guys. I cannot believe my jaw dropped when I read this next portion. Hello, welcome back to my channel. And if you're new, then welcome. I would love to earn your subscription today. This is part 3 of a series where we are looking at the eyewitness testimony of Lee Bowers, one of the 65 witnesses identified in or near Dealey Plaza who actually observed the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. In part 1, we read from these 4 books. This is 3 of them, and a portion from this one for the Warren Commission version of his testimony. We read about his mysterious death, and we read from an article by one of these authors named Penn Jones. He wrote an article called Disappearing Witnesses, about 100 mysterious deaths that had been related to the assassination of President Kennedy. So if you missed part 1, then you're going to want to go back and listen to it. In part 2, we went through this book. It's by Anita Dickinson. It is JFK Assassination Eyewitness, Rush to Conspiracy, the real facts of Lee Bowers' death. Now, she lives in Texas. She worked for the Dallas Police Department, and she actually was an automobile accident investigator for many years. So she was very highly qualified to evaluate the circumstances of Mr. Bowers' death. And one of the most amazing things that happened in her book is that she very likely identified the bridge that he would have hit. Now, I want to say also that those 2 episodes stand in stark contrast to one another. The first episode gives the eyewitness testimony of Lee Bowers, which is relevant whichever position you take on the circumstances of his death. But in part 1, we started to look at the potential for mystery around his death. In part 2, we looked at her rebuttal of that, primarily based on the fact that the attending physician at the time, who had identified it originally, reportedly, as a suspicious death, gave 2 interviews later where he did not agree with that indication of what he had said. He didn't agree with that interpretation. He thought that the conditions were likely to be similar to that of a coronary heart attack, that the sweating, the shock, the state that he observed was consistent with a heart attack. So that was his assessment. The other circumstances that we need to know about his death is that he had taken out a life insurance policy. He had, in the months prior to his death, given his testimony to Mark Lane for his book, Rush to Judgment, and had reportedly begun receiving death threats. And so that's part of why this death is seen as mysterious, not just the fact that he was an eyewitness, but that he was reporting death threats, that he had recently given a bit more information in the Mark Lane interviews than he had given in the Warren report. He had taken out an additional life insurance policy. And then what we learned also is that his wife had said they told him not to talk, and that she kind of like let that out in a moment of agitation to Penn Jones. So that's worth knowing. We are going to try to wrap up our discussion, at least at this point, of Lee Bowers through a look that's put together by Richard Belzer. Now, we went through one portion of Richard Belzer's book. It is a fantastic book called An In-Depth Investigation into the Mysterious Deaths of Witnesses to the JFK Assassination. It looks at 50 of the eyewitnesses or related witnesses that had any information about the JFK assassination, and basically chronicles the particulars of their death, what was significant about it, what was suspicious about it, and tries to make a ruling. So I think when I noticed that there was a Lee Bowers section in this book, I wanted to read it with you. Again, if you are interested in this topic, you'll want to get the whole book. There are 50 chapters, each on a different person associated with the case. So, chapter 23, Lee Bowers. It says August 9th, 1966. That was the date of his death. The victim was Lee Bowers. Cause of death, wounds suffered in automobile crash. Official verdict was accidental. But the inconsistencies are listed twofold. One, an eyewitness reported that Bowers' car was driven off the road by another car. Number two, Bowers, who did not die immediately, is said to have reported to emergency personnel that he believed he had been drugged during his stop for coffee shortly before the crash. So these are two things that have not been raised in the first two portions that we have looked at. And we have a third piece of information that I have not read anywhere else. So you guys, this reading is actually quite explosive. It is not just an overview of the things that we have already read. This book really brings it for us and helps us assess this case with a bit more insight and some more information. And I think you guys are going to be fascinated. Let's read. Lee Bowers was a very important witness who was in a unique vantage point during the assassination and clearly reported seeing things that starkly contrasted with the official version of events. Now, he quotes from a book that's written by Welsh, In the Shadow of Dallas, which we have not read. So I'm going to read these portions as they are written here. Lee Bowers' testimony is perhaps as explosive as any recorded by the Warren Commission. He was one of 65 known witnesses to the president's assassination who thought shots were fired from the area of the Grassy Knoll. The knoll is west of the Texas School Book Depository. But more than that, he was in a unique position to observe some pretty strange behavior in the knoll area during and immediately before the assassination. Bowers, then a tower man with the Union Terminal Co., was stationed in his 14-foot tower directly behind the Grassy Knoll. As he faced the assassination site, he could see the railroad overpass to his right front. Directly in front of him was a parking lot, and then a wooden stockade fence and a row of trees running along the top of the Grassy Knoll. The knoll sloped down to the spot on Elm Street where Kennedy was killed. Police had cut off traffic into the parking area, Bowers said, so that anyone moving around could actually be observed. The book goes on. What Bowers observed from that unique vantage point, facing down upon the now infamous Grassy Knoll, has fascinated JFK researchers for decades. Now, I do want to show you guys, I found the most helpful map in the back of Rush to Judgment during our reading last time. So I just want to put that up for us. You guys can see that map. It shows not just the location of, here's Houston Street, Elm Street, where the president's car went down and the shots occurred right in here before they passed under the triple underpass. Here is the picket fence and the pergola, but there is the railroad tower where Lee Bowers was stationed. So that is an important piece of information. You can see the proximity and why he was able to notice certain details that others missed, and why he was focused on that area, because it was closer to him and he had that vantage point of what was behind the fence. Bowers made two significant observations, which he revealed to the commission. First, he saw 3 unfamiliar cars slowly cruising around the parking area in the 35 minutes before the assassination. The first 2 left after a few minutes. The driver of the second car appeared to be talking into a mic or telephone. He was holding something up to his mouth with one hand, and he was driving with the other. That was a direct quote from Bowers. A third car with out-of-state plates and mud up to the windows probed all around the parking area. Bowers last remembered seeing it about 8 minutes before the shooting, pausing just above the assassination site. He gave detailed descriptions of the cars and their drivers. Bowers also observed 2 unfamiliar men standing on top of the knoll at the edge of the parking lot, within 10 or 15 feet of each other. One man middle-aged or slightly older, fairly heavy-set in a white shirt, fairly dark trousers. Another younger man, about mid-20s, in either a plaid shirt, plaid coat, or jacket. Both were facing toward Elm and Houston, where the motorcade would be coming from. They were the only strangers he remembered seeing. Now, if you're interested in the ways that that plaid shirt observation fits with another eyewitness, you'll want to go see part 2, where we talked about Julie Ann Mercer's testimony and how it fits together with Lee Bowers' testimony. On August 9th, 1966, Lee Bowers was killed when his car left the road and crashed into a concrete abutment in Midlothian, Texas. That also is in part 2, where she investigated and has pictures of the believed concrete abutment that's being described. As it was reported in the book High Treason, Lee Bowers was heading west on Highway 67 from Midlothian down to Cleburne, and according to an eyewitness, was driven off the road by a black car, sending him into a bridge abutment. He didn't die immediately. He held on for 4 hours, and during that time was talking to the ambulance people and told them that he felt he had been drugged when he stopped for coffee back a few miles in Midlothian. According to the author Penn Jones, Bowers began receiving death threats after testifying to the Warren Commission about what he had seen and after giving further evidence to attorney Mark Lane. This is the section that we read from that 100 disappearing witnesses. Bowers' widow at first insisted to Penn Jones that there was nothing suspicious about her husband's death. Then she became flustered and said, "They told him not to talk." Researcher David Welsh reported that the attending physician who accompanied Bowers in the ambulance noticed something peculiar about the victim. He was in a strange state of shock, a different kind of shock than an accident victim experiences. I can't explain it. I've never seen anything like it. So a unique form of shock. There was no autopsy, and apparently the body was soon cremated afterward. Later, another reference to the Welsh book indicates, quote, doctors saw no evidence that he had suffered a heart attack. The obvious question was asked in 1992 during a documentary by Geraldo Rivera called The Curse of JFK, Now It Can Be Told. Why would Lee Bowers have been killed when it seemed that he had already told all that he knew? That is troubling because he had already spoken to the Warren Commission, given his testimony, and then clarified basically one portion of it to Mark Lane by adding that the thing that had attracted his attention behind the fence, he couldn't really say for sure, but he thought perhaps it was a puff of smoke or a flash of light, that something had attracted his attention behind the fence. That was the only clarification that he gave, so it wasn't some sort of deep extra description. He had already fully described the 3 cars, described the 2 men behind the fence. There wasn't really any more additional information given, except that he saw either a puff of smoke or flash of light. So why would he be killed at that point once he had already given all that he knew? Well, there was reportedly a very good answer to that. Listen to this. The documentary stated that Bowers had confided in his minister that he had seen, quote, more than he had told publicly. Okay, so now we get into more information, and there is more coming, you guys. I cannot believe my jaw dropped when I read this next portion. A friend of Bowers named Walter Rischel told reporters that Bowers had been afraid to tell all that he actually witnessed during the JFK assassination. Rischel said that Bowers had confided him with information that was much more specific about the assassination, but that he was afraid to go public with it for very good reasons. Listen to this. Lee had disappeared for about 2 days. One night, I know for sure, which was very uncharacteristic of him. And when he came back, one of his fingers was missing on one of his hands. So Lee gave Monty, his brother, some excuse for what had happened, which Monty did not accept. So he called the local hospitals, the clinics, and some doctors' offices, and there was no record of anyone, certainly not Lee, going in and having that taken care of. What? That's what I said last night as I was reading this. What? I could not believe this account. Now, I haven't found record of this anywhere else. It all is said to have come from that Geraldo Rivera documentary, but from the friend of Bowers named Walter Rischel. So if you guys have more information about that, I would love to hear it. If there's more articles or more times that this man has been interviewed, I would love to know. But that is crazy cakes information that one of his fingers was missing after he was missing for at least 2 days. Shortly afterward, he was killed in the mysterious auto accident. Author Gerald Posner and researcher David Perry before him have attempted to preclude the tale of Bauer's death as nothing more than sensationalism. As Posner put it, it was conclusively proved that Bauer's death was accidental. Posner is apparently referring to the article by Mr. Perry, Now It Can Be Told, the Lee Bowers story. Posner and Perry are primarily referring to the criticisms of the investigatory work in a Geraldo documentary that investigates the death of Lee Bowers and certain claims which were aired on that program. That is the 1992 program that we've been discussing the last few minutes. Some of the criticisms of that program were very valid. Others, in our opinion, were not. It is actually an excellent brief documentary that you can watch online. I'm going to pull up this documentary and I will attempt to link it for you in the show notes below. There are contradictory claims concerning certain events related to the death, which at this point seem irreconcilable. It is difficult, if not impossible, to now verify them either way with a sufficient degree of certainty. That's not at all unusual regarding a now relatively obscure event that occurred many decades ago. It is true and noteworthy that some of the claims surrounding the death are unsubstantiated and vague. Yet the fact that the truth apparently lies somewhere in the middle doesn't preclude Mr. Posner from stating that Mr. Perry conclusively proved that Bauer's death was accidental. That would be convenient, but there's just one tiny little problem. It isn't actually true. Now, we're about to get into an investigation of the accident. I just want to remind you, if you are interested in the particulars of the accident, you may want to get this book that we went through parts of in episode 2. She is a former law enforcement officer with the Dallas Police Department. She was an advanced accident investigator with 27 years of law enforcement experience, and she actually identified what she believes is the site of the accident. She also looked through regulations in Texas law that would have applied at the time, so that's a valuable resource for you as well. Here is how this book addresses the investigatory part of that. A former member of the Texas Highway Patrol, Charles Good, concluded that another car had indeed forced Bauer's car off the road. He testified that eyewitness testimony confirmed that. So there's a Texas Highway Patrolman who investigated it. His name is Charles Good. He testified that the eyewitness testimony said that another car had indeed forced Bauer's car off the road. That is significant and that's important because that is not a single car accident. If someone forces you off the road and then you hit a concrete abutment and then you die from internal and head injuries, that's not a one-car accident. That's not a run-off road, typical, normal one-car accident where there was some sort of medical event. It's something different. Mr. Perry acknowledged that his investigation revealed that Charles Good was indeed a former member of the Texas Highway Patrol. He said it this way, who claims to have investigated the accident, apparently in an attempt to minimize the investigatory skills of Mr. Good. Well, Charles Good, a member of the Texas Highway Patrol, did conclude these things. He concluded that a car ran his friend, Lee Bowers, off the road. You can apparently find David Perry's article on mcadams.posc.mu.edu. I will try to find that and link to that in the show notes as well. But Mr. Perry couldn't dismiss the results of Charles Good's investigation, so he instead attempts to minimize them, stating that it is possible Bowers had been driving the car in the rear, and that if the driver in front wasn't looking in the rearview mirror, he wouldn't know how the accident occurred. In fairness, here is the concluding paragraph of the folks on the other side of this issue. So this book is trying to give a non-conspiratorial look at it while still making sure that all the data points are being talked about, which is helpful to us. So here is how he wraps up that article. In the end, Monty Bowers, the brother of Lee Bowers, concluded that Lee's allergies contributed to his death. Both Monty and Lee had severe allergies and were prone to fits of sneezing. They took antihistamines that provided little relief. Monty told representatives of the insurance company that his allergies bothered him that day. He assumed Lee experienced similar symptoms. Could it be Lee took antihistamines, dozed off, and struck the abutment? Is it possible a sneezing fit caused him to lose control of the vehicle? In my view, the answer is yes. I will modify my opinion when someone comes forward with verifiable facts to the contrary. So that's how the opposing view that this was any kind of conspiracy would view this situation. But this book wraps it up this way. As for us, frankly, there seems to be something a bit more sinister than a mere matter of sneezing here. So we'll stick with Mr. Good from the Texas Highway Patrol, who investigated the same case and concluded that his friend's car was forced off the road. Now, I would say the recognition that a Texas patrolman investigated the situation, determined that someone else had run him off the road, that there was eyewitness testimony to that effect, and also that Lee gave his brother Monty an excuse for why he disappeared for 2 days and came back missing a finger. Those pieces of data, run off the road, potentially drugged in a stop for coffee, and finger missing after 2 days gone, all right around the time of his death, to me does make it suspicious. What about you? We have reached the end of our look at the life of Lee Bowers, the death of Lee Bowers. I would love to hear from you. What do you make of Lee Bowers' account, his eyewitness testimony about the assassination, which we went through in episode 1? Whether or not there are issues with the accident, and then what do you make of the new evidence that was presented in this book? I found it really valuable. I think for my part, one of the things that I do often is I'll go to this site called Helmer Rehberg. They have done a great chronicling for us of the Mark Lane interviews, as well as other early interviews that were done in regard to the JFK assassination. And I've watched Lee Bowers' testimony many times over at this point. I find him highly credible. I think he saw what he said he saw. I don't think he's trying to add or, elaborate and add little bits of, exciting, dazzling things to his testimony. He seems very salt of the earth to me. So I find him highly credible. I think he saw what he said he saw. I do find the timing interesting, but it does seem suspicious to me that shortly after the Mark Lane interview, when there was a bit more information about what he saw behind the grassy knoll, that's when he starts getting threats. He ups his insurance money. There's apparently a 2-day disappearance where he's missing a finger. He is cremated, so we can't verify that. His widow told Penn Jones that they told him not to talk. There's just too much on the side for me of there being a they who is doing some sort of 2-day disappearance and finger taking and threatening of his life and then telling him not to talk, for me to just dismiss it all and say, oh, he accidentally ran off the road. My guess would be, like many others that we've talked about, that family members like Monty saying, oh no, it probably was just an allergy, a sneezing fit, is probably self-preservation. So I lean toward the belief not only that he saw what he saw and that I believe his eyewitness testimony, but also that I think his death was probably under suspicious circumstances. That's my take on it. If I find more information about Lee Bowers, then we will add to this little 3-part collection of readings about Lee Bowers. But at this point, this is all I plan to do about it. If you have relevant links or information, leave them in the comments. I will find those additional YouTube videos and articles so that you can do additional learning. And I want to hear from you in the comments. I hope you have a great day and come back next time for more readings. We are right now working through this book, The Kennedy Men, 3 Generations of Sex, Scandal, and Secrets by Nellie Bly. And it has been a wonderful look at getting the overarching picture of the Kennedy men. Right now we are reading into the later years of the Kennedys, but the book started with Joe and Rose and Joe Jr. and Jack. So you can jump in at any point. You can jump in where we're at right now, or you can go back to the beginning and enjoy that whole playlist. So I hope you have a great day. We'll see you soon. Bye.